Yeah.
Alright, I am recording. It records this one. Oh yeah, I need to share my screen. Cool. Right, going over last week. So, we had the week before. I didn't do a synopsis on that, but I've sort of done that. So I'll go through both of them just so we're completely in the right mindset. So, Paul knows he's going to be taken into captivity when returning to Jerusalem, but says he's ready to die. He and 5 others complete the purification ritual in order to show reverence for the law and to appease the Jews. However, Jews say he brought a Gentile into the temple, and they seize and beat him, demanding he be killed. The Roman commander gets involved because of the commotion and takes Paul. Because Paul is Roman as well as Jewish, he's afraid of the consequences if Paul is mistreated. Paul gives his full testimony to the Jews, explaining he was one of them and the most zealous Pharisee. The Jews demanded he be killed even after this testimony. We discuss how it's understandable the Jews are zealous for their against their traditions. Say for their traditions to be upheld and not breaking God's laws. But they don't have ears to hear his true testimony. We also discussed that we as Christians need to learn that while it's important to uphold the law, we must love truth and be ready to receive new revelation. Acts 23 and 24, Paul smartly appeals to being a Pharisee and that he was visited. Oh God, that he was visited by an angel. This causes the Pharisees present to take his side against the Sadducees who do not believe in angels and spirits. Jesus appears to Paul at night and tells him not to fear because he wants Paul to testify of him in Rome. Paul's nephew hears of a plot to kill Paul. Do you remember they said they wouldn't eat or drink until he was dead? 40 of them gonna lie in wait. Paul sends the nephew to the commander to tell him of this. Because of this, I'll say the commander sends a letter to Governor Felix and sends Paul explaining he is a Roman and the Jews want him dead and asking him to rule on the matter. Paul gives his defense of what he has done and that he has done nothing wrong. He also testified of Christ. Felix is afraid but gives Paul favour, allowing some freedoms and for people to come and visit him. And Paul's in captivity for 2 years like this. So I think the final thing we had was Paul appealing to that he wanted to be judged by Caesar. Uh, Paul requests he is judged by Caesar as a Roman, and Felix says, fine, then to Rome you will go. I believe that was the last thing we read. You had any more thoughts and reflections on it since we read?
Mm, Not really. Just that um, I don't think I really realised, just because I haven't sort of studied Acts like this before, just how much opposition he faced. Paul. Um, I mean, I knew he'd been imprisoned and things and shipwrecked, but it was like every day the opposition's just huge.
Well, and he was
So
2 years in
I
jail there,
guess,
wasn't he?
yeah. I mean, I guess nothing's changed. We've
I
got
mean,
people.
one thing that stands out to me with this, and I think it's something that I like, because God led me into politics when I was like 30, 31. And I just found myself fascinated with politics and what was going on. But there was a part of me that was kind of begrudgingly getting into politics because I was like, I don't really like the idea of politics. I feel like it's a necessary evil, and it's not really a world I want to focus more on religion and that side of things. But here we're seeing that the political and the religious they 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 go hand in hand, because here the way Paul's being treated and all the dynamics and how he's going to have to deal with the opposition, he's having to play politics. So he's having to claim to the Pharisees to do that. He's having to claim, okay, Caesar, not you guys, so that he isn't killed by the Jews. And the politicians that you have in charge of your country are going to rule on religious matters when it comes down to the fundamental level of, and we're seeing that with like the likes of Tommy Robinson, where you could argue that Tommy Robinson's not particularly going on a religious slant, but he is anti-Islam, which is a religious entity, and because of that, he's ending up in jail. He's having to face judges and courts and accusations, and so I do think as Christians, we should be very aware and knowledgeable of the politics of our country, because if you are going to stand for Christ, and this was something that Bill Johnson taught years ago, and at first I didn't like it, but I've realised more and more that it's true. Is he said that the church is a political entity. It's a distribution of power amongst the believers, and it is because like when you meet together, you're making decisions on what's tolerated, how things should be. It is political in nature. You have a leader, you have, you can't appease all people. Things have got to be done in a certain way. Um, and then the church should, and this is where I think Christians, there's a certain amount you can't draw from these Bible scriptures, which is because in this context, the church is being established. So you don't have a Christian country. You don't have, like we're fortunate in England, and I think in lots of other countries where you do have a lot of Christian ethics woven into the political system. And so, yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
seeing.
I think that came through common law, didn't it? I mean, where uh, it's never attributed to us because we only get attributed to the bad things. But um, wherever we went, whatever country we um, invaded, if you like, we brought common law.
Well, I think that the absolutely revolutionary side of English common law is that each individual is judged fairly under the law. That you can have a king and you can have a homeless
Mm,
person, but whoever is right, that is where the law sides with, and the other person faces
mm,
the consequences regardless of role or deed or anything like that. And it sounds like a given today, but when it was rolled out, revolutionary, absolutely
yes,
revolutionary. And
yes.
like people claim human rights now, which I'm learning through Christian apologetics is nonsense. There's no such thing as a human right. All human rights are is power. You've decided that this thing must happen no matter what. That's what a human right is. So, but they pull from the Christians who created the Constitution of America, where they say we find these rights to be self-evident, but they say given by the Creator, so that we're all created equal. That that level playing field very much has come through Christianity, and that's where I think the
Mm,
majority of Christian countries you're going to find more fair law, you're going to find more fair education systems, and then I think a perversification of that is to try and equalize among levels where we're not equal. So the idea that everyone should earn the same money, everyone's entitled to the same stuff, it's like, no, we're not equal that way. And I think that's the same with male female relationships, with black white, all of those dynamics is like trying to say that equal equals godly is just not true. Like it depends on the context and what you're talking about. But obviously, in terms of value and in terms of representation before the law, in terms of getting justice, we're all equal. We're all made in the image of God. So yeah, I'm just like I think I'm almost coming to the opinion that as a Christian, you should be involved in politics or you should be knowledgeable about politics in the sense that, like, what is the church's role? within a nation. It's to be the voice and the bringer of God's kingdom to earth as it is in heaven, and you
Yes.
can't do that outside of politics. You
No.
can, but then the politics is going to come and suffocate and persecute and all of the rest of it. So it's wise to go after the politics because that is going to be the deciding factor when the rubber hits the road.
Mm.
And so the battles
Um,
need to be fought on the different fronts.
you're streaming this. Are you recording it?
Yes.
Ah, just checking.
No, yeah, no, appreciate that. Let me make sure it's. I'm streaming my screen to you, but I'm recording in OBS.
Okay. Cool.
So
Cool.
yeah, it's just something that's been on my mind that like I can see now why God took me into politics, made me knowledgeable about politics, and it's like the Christian, the church, especially like a national church, if you've got a big following of Christ, should have a voice on the political things that are happening within the country. And I think where we've seen our country deteriorate and become more evil and more perverse, it's directly linked to the lack of the voice of the church. And
Yeah, I mean the voice of the church um, doesn't, in my opinion, stand for biblical values,
no,
and I think that's where the disrespect has come, even from unbelievers. They expect you. They expect from the church a standard, God's standard, and it isn't there anymore, so
I
they ignore it.
I actually see a similarity with the relationship with the church and the nation as husband and wife. Is that as the husband, you say the truth no matter what. And if your wife rejects you and gets upset, you're just patient until she comes round. And it's the same with the church. It's like you have to say the strong thing that is true. The rejection is inevitable. So, we are going to be persecuted. We are going to be told you think you're better than us and you think you're high and mighty. And I think that's what's crept into Christian minds and it's crept into men's minds with women is if I appease them, if I get them on board, we'll be happier together. And it's like, no, you can't perversify the roles. The role that you're meant to play is to be the voice of righteousness despite the rejection. And yes, there'll always be a level
Mm.
of rejection, but it's that dynamic. I think Paul writes about it where he says, "Where righteous men stay silent, evil avails much." So, in as much as righteousness is not spoken, that is the degree. So, evil is always going to avail. There's always going to be evil, but to the degree that we stay silent and don't say the truths that need to be spoken, it will run rampant. And that's why we've got, young boys having their penises cut off and women being made barren from a young age in the name of identity. The church should be so vocal against that. But I mean, as we saw, me and Maureen were talking the other night that you've got the English Archbishop talking with the Kenyan one, and the English one is telling them you need to accept LGBT, you need to be inclusive, you
Um,
need to, and it's like that is absolute heresy, absolute falsehood, absolute sin. There is no debate on the issue, and so of course the church is not respected in England because we don't even stand on our own values. Um,
exactly. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, and we just need to keep praying, really,
we need a
and
reformation, a
just
strong reformation.
yeah, we do, we do.
All right, let's get into it. So, after Festus had conferred with the council, he declared, "You have appealed to Caesar you will go." A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and paid their respects to Festus. I looked this up, so this is King Agrippa II, the first one being one of the chief persecutors of Christians in early Christianity. Um, where is it? It's the grandson of Herod, no, great grandson of Herod the Great. So he's the son of Agrippa the First, who was the one who killed John. So I
You
believe.
know, you normally bring the Bible gateway up, but I
Oh,
can't
you can't
see
see
it.
it. Oh, I.
No,
Are you sure it's streaming? You might need to.
yeah, but that's it. I can't.
Uh, Oh, I think I shared the wrong one. Okay.
Okay.
There.
Ah, that's it.
Sorry, yeah, I must have shared the wrong one. Yeah, so here it's Herod Agrippa is in Acts 12. He's the one, I think he's king of the Jews. So he's the one who kills John and imprisons Peter. He's the one who died
Gosh.
the sudden death after accepting praise for God. And then this is his son, uh, King Agrippa the second. And this is where he, because it says here, this is where he hears Paul's defense, where we're at. So, so it's the King of the Jews, interestingly, and like it's interesting how it ties together because it's the king whose father killed John the Baptist, who has put Peter in jail. So Paul is on behalf of those people, and so you're seeing these two worlds clash again, and the King of the Jews being quite a key political figure within all of it, right?
So was he a Roman,
Who?
King Agrippa?
No, no, he's
King
Jewish.
Agrippa. Ah,
He's the Jewish king.
okay. Okay.
So yeah, he arrives with his wife Bernice. I didn't know the name Bernice was in the Bible. To pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said, "There is a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he be condemned. I told them that it is not the Roman custom to hand over anyone before they have faced their accusers and have had an opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. When they came here with me, I did not delay the case, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. When his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any of the crimes I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus who Paul claimed was alive. I was at a loss how to investigate such matters, so I asked if he'd be willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial there on these charges. But when Paul had made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decision, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear this man myself. He replied, Tomorrow you will hear him. The next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp, great pomp, and entered the audience room with the high-ranking military officers and the prominent men of the city. At the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said, King Agrippa, and all who are present with us, you see this man. The whole Jewish community has petitioned me about him in Jerusalem and here in Caesarea, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. I found he had done nothing deserving of death. But because he made his appeal to the emperor, I decided to send him to Rome. But I have nothing definite to write to his majesty about him. Therefore I have brought him before all of you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that as a result of this investigation I may have something to write. For I think it's unreasonable to send a prisoner on to Rome without specifying the charges against him.
Wow.
It's quite reasonable, isn't it? It's like,
Yes, it is.
and you can see within the Roman ethos quite a, I mean, I don't know if they always kept to it, but this idea that a man should be tried. I would imagine more so because he's a Roman citizen, so he has the customs of Rome, but he's like, he has to have an opportunity to stand against his accusers, and we have to know what charges there are.
Yeah. I mean, I just think of Pontius Pilate, making the Jews, uh, making them, it was their decision that crucified Jesus. Because he said, out of these two, which one do you want? So they'd rather have a thief and a murderer
But then
living.
that's where you have got the different dynamic. Like Jesus wasn't a Roman, so where Paul's a Roman, because Pontius Pilate, the washing of the hands and everything is, this is your people, judging, you're ruling and making decisions over yourselves, but we as occupiers, do have the final say. So he's trying to give them every opportunity of like, I can't see why you would want this man killed, really. Like, would you not want this man?
Yeah,
But with Paul, there's a
yeah,
bit more onus on them because he's a Roman and he has
true.
to be treated right, otherwise there could be consequences because it's a Roman. But yeah, he's Jewish and Roman. And again, you see God's wisdom in all of this, and the beauty is this is very much the phase of the Gentiles being brought into the kingdom of heaven. You know, it's not that long before that Peter's had the revelation. They've started going out to Gentiles, and we see Paul as one of the strongest ambassadors of Gentiles here in the gospel. And so it's kind of appropriate that he's Jewish and Gentile. Like,
Mm,
not that you can be both, he is Jewish, but the fact that he's got Roman citizenry does mean he's got a foot in both camps. Um,
yeah.
and that we know that Jesus has appeared and said, I want you to testify in Rome, which is all possible because of who he is. And what, so it's like you can just see God bringing everything together. Like, um, yeah, quite fascinating, really. And I was thinking, if I was to witness to a Jew who was not messianic, who didn't believe in Jesus, I think I would take him to Peter and Paul, giving their accounts of why they've made the decision that Gentiles can be brought in, and say to them, that's the decision you're going to have to make. Your forefathers rejected that, but weigh up their testimony. Like, is there not weight to it? Like, if what they're saying is true, and if the accounts of what Jesus said and did are true, and now you've got Paul and Peter giving good reasons why Gentiles are now brought into the kingdom of God, you know, you need to weigh it up. But ultimately, the Jew, or a big chunk of the Jews at the time, just rejected the testimony. He said, no, you're just a man. Jesus was just a man. And so then you're left with that, aren't you? Can't do anything with that.
Mm, mm,
But then, and then I would take them to the prophecies of Jesus. You know, Isaiah's prophecies, and you know, there's so many prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. Where you're like, well, if he's not the Messiah, who is? And
yeah.
and really, what you're doing is you are being Judas. Judas, who knowing Jesus and all of his teachings and what he stood for, still said, okay, well, he's not my Messiah. So, and
Mm,
then you do take the condemnation that comes with that. And I do think that's why the Jews have been persecuted so badly, is if you are going
mm,
to, knowing the Son of God, say you don't want him, that's a huge spiritual license for the accuser, the devil, to have his way with you. In the same way it did with, in fact, really enjoying the Bible study with the boys, because we're going through John, and you know, we had the feeding of the 5,000, and then how Jesus says, how it always makes me laugh, none may partake of everlasting life unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood. This is a hard saying. Who can understand it? And it's like, man, at the time, it seems so, like, if you think within the context, like, he hasn't been crucified yet. There's no knowledge that he's going to be crucified. He's openly just saying it opaquely. You have to eat of my flesh and you have to drink of my blood. Um, and so, you know, we were talking about how it's coming up, and this is all many things that the disciples, they understood later, what Jesus meant, and they spent a lot of their time scratching their heads and being like, oh yeah, I mean, I believe him, I see what he's doing, etc. Um, but yeah, I'm enjoying, because I'm doing Acts and John at the same time, and it's quite a nice, because you've got Jesus, who is the superstar, who is like, a lot of the things he says, they're quite, I don't know. That like, I'm realizing, because I'm reading it with two people who aren't that knowledgeable in scripture, it's very hard for them to understand what he's talking about the majority of the time. A lot of what Jesus said, you know, oh, you've come across to me because I gave you bread, but if you really knew the scriptures and the history, you would come to me for the bread of life. If you eat of this bread, you will never eat and thirst again. And I can see the guys going, but they did, didn't they? And it's like, yeah, but it's spiritual talk. It's like, so it's I think Jesus spoke, because he has to say the truth as the truth is, because he is the truth. He just says it as is. And then there is that journey that people have to have with Jesus of, okay, I sort of get it, but I sort of don't. And then later on, you have the full revelation where it all makes sense, and reading it again, you know. So it's just, I never saw how enigmatic Jesus was in John. He's very enigmatic. A lot of the things he says are just, and he gives such a good. Sorry, I am going on a slight divert, but this is something I'm getting from both things that God's really drilling into me. Is this dynamic of the law and the grace, and that we are under grace, not under law. And I used to think that no, the grace was fulfilled, so we're still under law, but the grace is the manner by which we interpret the law and apply the law. But when Jesus gives his account, because he heals the lame man who had not walked for 38 years, and says, "Pick up your rug and go." The Pharisees are mortally offended because the guy's carrying his rug on the Sabbath day. And when they come before Jesus to kill him, and Jesus gives an account, he says, "You've not understood why the law was given. You keeping circumcision will circumcise a child on the Sabbath day so that that is upheld. You know you're not breaking the Sabbath. So me," and he says, "have righteous judgment." And that to me is the difficult caveat, is the law in and of itself is not enough. You knowing right and wrong is not enough. You've still got to have righteous judgment with the law. And I think that's the dynamic that we get under grace, is when you have been born again and your heart and your mind have been renewed, if you are submitted to him, you'll be a righteous judge. There's nothing you can do about people who have been born again in that and then they go into unrighteousness. Their judgment is going to be unrighteous. So that dynamic's a very difficult dynamic, I think, in the Christian walk. Is
Yes.
we have the laws, but they're not. This is what I mean about the purity before marriage and other dynamics, not to go too much into that, but it's like, yeah, you have the law, which is do not do this, but then you have caveats where it's like, well, why is the law given? What's that meant to achieve? What's the situation you're in? Are you being legalistic in nature, or are you in keeping with God and his ethos, his principles, his bringing kingdom to heaven? And that's where I think it's not as simple as this is right, this is wrong. You have to judge within a context and take the context into consideration. And the other example Jesus gives is David and his followers are dying, or they're going to starve, and he eats in the temple. He's eating God's food, but Jesus said, but David understood the law was not there so that men would starve. The law is there for the sanctity of God. So you have the principle, but they absolutely broke the law that in another context you would kill someone for doing. But in that context it's fine because of the situation. So this is where I think there's just no way of getting around. You're going to have people who love the law over the principle, and you're going to have people who judge righteously. And hopefully the leaders of your church are going to be those who judge righteously. But yeah, it's just something that God's unpacking and building on more and more in my head, and I want to become a good articulator of it, because I do think it's quite the fear is that when you go and say, well, the law's not the law, then are you now giving license for just sinning? Oh well, in this context I don't need to keep God's laws, God will understand. So that's the other side I want to tackle as well, and I'm going to go into Paul's teachings to do that, is where he says do not make a mockery. But yeah, I'm remembering a bit now. Okay, this is where we're at, isn't it?
Yeah. So Paul's gonna.
Oh yeah, so Agrippa. So then Agrippa said to Paul, "You have permission to speak for yourself." So Paul motioned with his hand and began his defense. "King Agrippa, I considered myself fortunate to stand before you today as I make my defense against all the accusations of the Jews, and especially to you because you are well acquainted with all the Jewish customs and controversies. Therefore I beg you to listen to me patiently. The Jewish people all know the way." Wait. Agrippa in the Bible Jewish. I was certainly was, but the way they keep talking is as though the Jews are someone else. Although he was a Roman appointed client king. Yeah, Jewish by religion and lineage. Yeah, okay. They keep saying the Jews, but I guess it's just like in terms of that's his accusers. And Herod isn't his accuser because he's just coming into it from side. Okay, just wanted to make sure I was right with that. The Jewish people all know the way I've lived ever since I was a child, from the beginning of my life in my own country and also in Jerusalem. They have known me for a long time and can testify, if they are willing, that I conform to the strictest sect of our religion, living as a Pharisee. And now it is because of my hope in what God has promised our ancestors that I am on trial today. This is the promise our 12 tribes are hoping to see fulfilled as they earnestly serve God day and night. King Agrippa, it is because of this hope that these Jews are accusing me. Why should any of you consider it incredible that God raises the dead? I too was convinced that I ought to do all that was possible to oppose the name of Jesus of Nazareth, and that is just what I did in Jerusalem. On the authority of the chief priests, I put many of the Lord's people in prison, and when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. Many a time I went from one synagogue to another to have them punished, and I tried to force them to blaspheme. I was so obsessed with persecuting them that I even hunted them down in foreign cities. On one of these journeys I was going to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests. About noon, King Agrippa, as I was on the road, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me and my companions. We all fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Then I asked, Who are you, Lord? I am Jesus who you are persecuting, the Lord replied. Now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as a servant and as a witness of what you have seen and will see of me. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. So then, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the vision from heaven, first to those in Damascus, and then to those in Jerusalem and in all Judea, and then to the Gentiles. I preached that they should repent and turn to God, and demonstrate their repentance by their deeds. That is why some Jews seized me in the temple courts and tried to kill me. But God has helped me to this very day, so I stand here and testify to small and great alike. I am saying nothing beyond what the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Messiah would suffer, and, as the first to rise from the dead, would bring the message of light to his own people and to the Gentiles. At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. You're out of your mind, Paul, he shouted. Your great learning is driving you insane. I am not insane, most excellent Festus, Paul replied. What I am saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I am convinced that none of this has escaped his notice, because it was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. Then Agrippa said to Paul, Do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian? Paul replied, Short time or long, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains. The king rose, and with him the governor and Bernice, those sitting with them. After they left the room, they began saying to one another, This man is not doing anything that deserves death or imprisonment. Agrippa said to Festus, This man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar.
Oh,
That is hilarious, though. I mean, because if he doesn't appeal to Caesar, he'd have been sent to Jerusalem before Agrippa's there. But then you're seeing that Agrippa comes, and this would be something that, again, it's a good witness to the Jews. Is your king, who was pro-thing, is saying he's not worthy of death for what he's doing.
yes.
Like, why does he need to be killed? He's not broken any of the laws of the temple. He's just saying things that you guys disagree with. He's just converting people to a sect of your religion that you don't agree with.
Also, he's giving his testimony of having that encounter on the road to Damascus, which you can't argue with. You can't, when somebody has an encounter with God like that, you can't argue with it because you weren't there. He was. He's telling you what
Well,
happened.
and there's something. It was another interesting thing that Jesus says in John that I was reading with the guys. Is he was saying to them when they came over and they're asking him, "Is he the Christ?" He says, get this right. I know that you do not know the scriptures of old, and you do not love. God. So he says, he's very enigmatic with it again. He's like, you do not know me because you do not know who sent me. For none knows the Father except who the Father has revealed. And we also discuss as men where he says, none will receive me except those that the Father has given permission to. So he says, none know the Son except he who sent him. Only the Father knows the Son. But any who receives the Son will see the Father. He says, but you do not receive me because you do not know of the scriptures of your fathers and you do not love them. If you knew the ways of your fathers and you loved the God of your forefathers, you would see me, you would accept me. So there is this dynamic that it's like, you can see Paul is being able to talk much more plainly with him than with the Romans, where he's just being very matter of fact with what's happened. Because, like he's saying, King Agrippa, you know what the prophets have said, and I know that you love them and believe them. Therefore, look, this is it. This is what we were foretold. Like, it's not that crazy to say resurrection when we were told that there would be the first to deliver us from death. This is Jesus. This is the fulfillment. So it's interesting because it's like, why do the Jews hate and want to kill Jesus, Paul, and Peter? Because they're upholding the teachings of their forefathers. Why do they not accept Peter, Paul, and Jesus? Because they don't know the teachings of their forefathers.
Mm.
So it's that surface level knowledge of, knowing the law and what's right and wrong, and it's not the true knowing and loving of why it was given and what it's in preparation of and all the rest of it. Which is why I think Paul was prepped to be the man he was, because yes, he was incredibly wrong, a persecutor of the Christians, but he knew his scriptures, he knew the teachings of old, he was very zealous. So then when the revelation comes, Paul's like, okay, yeah, this is what was foretold. And that's where, like, again with the boys, when we're looking through some of the, the fact that Isaiah says his clothes are going to be torn and gambled for lots. It's thousands of years before, like,
Yeah.
because this is where some people say, oh, well, he only gives general prophecies. No,
Mm.
this is where also Jesus said, because they said, oh, we don't accept him as the Christ because he came from Nazareth. And Jesus says, you do not know, it was foretold that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem. And they all looked at each other and said, but he doesn't come from Bethlehem, he comes from Nazareth. They didn't know he'd been born in Bethlehem. So it's like, the way all the prophecies are fulfilled in such a, he's a descendant of Mary, and we looked into that, and the descendants of, Mary is a descendant of David, meaning that he is a son of David, because many of them rejected saying, he's not a son of David. And Jesus doesn't respond to it, but it's like, but see, Jesus doesn't feel the need. He knows the truth, and, you know, but it's like, if you know all those prophecies, if you know the teachings that have been handed down, not the surface level, but really understanding, and then there is a requirement to love it. Like, that's what Jesus is saying, is you don't love the father of my forefathers, so that's why you don't accept me. And I think that's just a line in every human heart that's very hard to. It's either there or it isn't.
Yeah. And I think it also, you know, you shouldn't really accept anything on just surface level knowledge.
No.
You should look into things in depth and not just accept stuff. As a general principle, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what made the UK, America, and the Western world so great was the education systems, and the
Yeah.
education systems were based on the Bible, and it was
Mm.
like the need to know history, the need to know things at a deep level, that you are knowledgeable, that was highly valued. You see it now in Asian culture, um, but I do think that was pioneered from the Bible, and this is where Jordan Peterson makes the case that he says the Bible was the first book. He said, and I mean that literally, in the sense that they had scribes and they had parchments. The Bible was the first one we know that was recorded, that was first put into a book. And Jordan Peterson says, no Bible, no Shakespeare.
Mm.
He said, because you're all the dynamics that Shakespeare plays with, all the characters, all the roles, all trace back to the morals of the Bible. So
Yeah.
it's with the sharing of that that you get Shakespeare. All the amazing things. The scientific model is that you can remove bias, that you pursue the truth of a situation by testing it in a controlled way so you can know if something's true or not.
Mm.
It was a big
Mm.
debate between Dawkins and John Lennox, where John Lennox said, you cannot be a scientist unless you're a man of faith. You have to have
Mhm.
faith that there's a law that you can find. Otherwise, why are you doing the experiment? You have to believe
Mhm.
that there is law and intelligible intelligence to the way things are. Otherwise, why do the experiments? It's probably all just chance. So, all of that has come out of the Bible. Like all of that idea that there are laws, that God has made things in a certain way, all of the rest of it is traced back to that. So, if you in life are wanting to be knowledgeable and wise, you can become knowledgeable and wise in education, you can become knowledgeable and wise in all these different fields that we've just mentioned, law, politics, all this. But at the deepest level, it goes down to religion and the scriptures, because that is the underpinning of all the other things. So that is what we lost as a country, is we became, the country as a whole became cultural Christians. So they're just following the principles of their fathers, like, yeah, you should treat everyone as equal, treat others as you should like to be treated. Like, I remember when I realized reading how much of a miracle forgiveness is. That Jesus
Mm.
says it's no lesser a miracle to forgive someone's sins as it is to heal them. So they're just as miraculous. It's not in the human heart to forgive.
Mm.
Yet in England and in a lot of Western cultures, forgiveness is a given. Oh no, no, you forgive. Oh no, yeah, you should forgive. That's the right thing to do. So that's how much it permeated our culture. But why do we forgive? Most people say, well, because it's the right thing to do. No, because Jesus told us to. God told us to. That's why you forgive. It's not because some smart guy realized that that's the best thing to do. It is because Jesus told us to do it. So where you've got the generations falling away from the knowledge of why it was given, the ethos of why it was given, the in-depth, you also lose love with that thing, and so you don't see it anymore. And that's where the perversities and the heresies creep in. So I think I'm seeing in England, we are as perverse and fallen as the Jews were of that time,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
these are the problems. Because even if you have a Christian man stand up now and speak the truth, he'll be attacked by the others for being evil. They were claiming
Yes.
Paul was evil, and you can say to them, "Well, what's he done deserving of death?" No, he needs to be killed.
Yeah.
So I just find it fascinating, the parallels, and I think that dynamic is crucial. That it's like within Christianity, I'm also seeing that it's like this surface level teaching that they do every Sunday of we need to be compassionate, we need to be forgiving. No, you need to know the church history. You need to know these people, why they did what they did, how they did it, because you're not going to love them and love the preservation of that if you don't know it in depth. And this is where you're
Mm.
seeing these dynamics at play here. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, this is the start of another chapter.
So presumably he was let go.
No, no, he was saying he would have been if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. So, because the King Agrippa's
Ah,
there to just question him with him. I mean, Festus has come to the conclusion he's insane because of the way he's talking. Apparently, there is a quote where he famously says, where was it? Famously says to him in 26:28, almost you persuade me to be a Christian. 26:28. Did we read that? And do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian? Okay. I mean, I think that's a bad translation. But that is like a yeah, it's fascinating that like given who his father was, that he is at least entertaining what Paul's saying, and he's sort of defensive of Paul, not doesn't deserve death. He must be more righteous than his father was. Oh, then
yeah,
you see with the father, it was the wife, wasn't it? The wife was the one who tricked him because he didn't even want John the Baptist dead. So she said, I think it was for her birthday, I want his head on a
yeah,
plate.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but then he was evil because he was the one who went out saying that he
All the
was.
and killed all the babies, the boys.
No, no, that's an earlier Herod. Um,
Ah, beg your pardon.
no, wait, would it have been the same one? Maybe, because yeah, that would have been around the time that Jesus was born. Uh, which Herod killed the babies in the Bible? Herod the Great. Is Herod the Great Herod Agrippa? No, they're different rulers from the same family dynasty. Herod the Great was the grandfather of Herod Agrippa the First.
Right, so it's the same family line.
Same family line. So yeah, interesting. Like Herod. What does Herod mean? I don't know if it has meaning. Maybe it's just a name, but largely derived from the Greek meaning heroic or son of a hero. Ah, so it's got Greek influence. Brave or exalted one. Yeah, so you've got that lineage is quite a key lineage, isn't it, in terms of Christianity?
Mm.
That you've got Herod the Great killing all the babies, trying to kill Jesus because he's rumored to be king of the Jews. Then you've got his grandson. How does that work though? So he must have been very old when Jesus was born then,
Yeah.
because then the grandson. Oh, but then I guess Paul is some time after Jesus, isn't he? How
I, I don't know the exact timing of
long
that.
after Jesus's death is Paul born? Yeah, no, that does make sense actually. Paul was not born after Jesus' death. He was born around the same time. Oh, really? While Paul didn't meet Jesus during his ministry, his conversion occurred roughly 3 to 7 years after the crucifixion. So then Paul would have been late 30s, early 40s when he converted.
Yeah.
So then if the grandfather's trying to kill Jesus when he's born, then this Herod must be quite young. Because if his grandfather's ruling. Yeah, I'm just trying to put it all together. Oh, yeah, so Herod the Great ruled up till 4 years before Jesus is. Up till 4 BC. How can he be 4 BC if he commanded the killing of all the babies? Because surely he's got to be in rule when Jesus was born, which would be like 0.
Well, no, it's BC and then AD, isn't it?
Yeah, but I thought that the whole point is BC is before Christ. So from the point Jesus is born is when it changes into AD.
Is it? Yeah.
Was Herod the Great in power when Jesus was born? I mean, you have to be careful believing everything that Google says. Herod the Great
Yeah.
was the king of Judea when he was born. According to the Gospel, Herod was reigning in the Magi. Historical accounts confirm Herod reigning from 37 to his death in 4 BC, placing Jesus' birth in the final years of his reign. But am I being stupid here? Like, when does BC end and AD start? Marking the traditional birth of Jesus. Anno Domini. While designed to mark the birth of Jesus, the scholars generally believe Jesus was born slightly earlier, around 6 to 4 BC. Oh, that's why. So our calendar's wrong. So yeah, so Jesus was born 4 BC, so he was born before Christ. It's kind of funny. Okay, so that's why the dates don't make sense. Okay. Yeah, anyway, I just like to I like to get it in my head that it's like, okay, you've got Herod the Great, then you've got his son, who I don't think we hear anything about, then his grandson, who persecutes the Jews and is the one who's smited down, and then this is the great grandson of Herod the Great, Herod Agrippa II, who hears Paul and is kind of sympathetic. Because the sin of the fathers goes down 3 generations. So you've got Herod Agrippa, his son, then you've got no, Herod the Great, then his son, then Herod Agrippa the first, and then he'd be the fourth. So maybe why he's more sympathetic that he's not under his father's sins. Okay. What do we take from this then? I mean, this is more. Yeah, I guess it is that dynamic of the fact that Agrippa, being the king of the Jews and familiar with the Jews' prophecies and scriptures, Paul talks more plainly with him, and it all seems insane to Festus. But he's saying, no, but King Agrippa, I'm talking plainly with, because where is it? I'm not insane, Festus. What I'm saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I'm convinced that none of this has escaped his notice, because it was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. So, yeah. I mean, because if we get into this, it's like where he sails to Rome, he has the storm and the shipwreck. So I'm feeling like that's a good study for next week. Don't really want to start it. Yeah, anything else you guys want to share or pray about?
Mm.
I mean, while you're thinking, I will say every week getting really good with the guys. Like, only thing is like Luke attends intermittently. I can tell with Jalzar, maybe there's like wavering enthusiasm. He does enjoy it, but he's like thinking. Andy and Roy are just on it. Interesting with Roy. Roy, I'm having very. Actually, let me stop the recording because that's enough of the Bible study.